macaroni and cheese, cigarettes and coffee, spaghetti and some huge meatballs. All of these may be iconic duos, but none of them will ever come close to being as significant as Batman and Robin, the world's preeminent crime-fighting partners. Robin may serve a simple storytelling purpose, bringing a flash of family and warmth to Batman's eternally dark corner of the DCU, but the different individuals under the Domino mask have all brought something unique to the role. Jason Todd's certainly not my favorite Robin, here's to you, Tim Drake, but his short time in the costume cast a large shadow over the entire Bat mythos. Ask comic fans about Jason Todd's first appearance, and they'll likely mention Batman catching the young boy trying to swipe tires off the Batmobile. And while that's technically not wrong, thanks to Crisis on Infinite Earths, Jason has one of the most convoluted backstories in comics. In order for Marv Wolfman and George Perez's work depicting Dick Grayson as an adult in New Teen Titans to stick, DC requested Detective Comics writer Jerry Conway to introduce a new boy wonder in 1983. Originally, Jason Todd started his heroic career just like Dick Grayson did, the son of two murdered acrobats who is ultimately taken in by Bruce Wayne and given a new, adventurous life. While Conway acknowledges the structure can be perceived as lazy, he told The Beat that he wanted to embrace the symmetrical elements of the Bat universe, bonding Batman and his new protege through a shared history of family trauma. Ultimately, all of Conway's work was swept aside about 2 years later in favor of a more distinct origin. Even though Jason barely appeared in Marv Wolfman's work, the writer indirectly shaped the character's history more than almost any other writer during the 80s. After Wolfman's multiverse-shattering Crisis on Infinite Earths, Jason's backstory was completely rebooted, discarding his acrobatic past and turning him into an angry street punk. It was 1987, the drug war was raging, and DC decided to revamp Jason's parents to better fit the times.
Who taught you how to do this stuff?
You, all right? I learned it by watching you.
Parents who use drugs have children who use drugs.
Instead of performers who try helping Batman take down Killer Croc, the Todds are drug addicts and criminals themselves, providing a loose explanation as to why this version of Jason took to the streets with such a massive chip on his shoulder. Instead of putting another pure, positive individual in harm's way like he did with Dick, Bruce was able to look at his decision to train Jason through a savior lens, rescuing an angry boy from a life of crime and hopefully helping him course correct before things went too far. With Dick Grayson coming into his own as leader of the Teen Titans and ultimately ditching the Robin persona altogether to become Nightwing, it became harder for him to serve an ancillary role in Batman's stories. DC could have continued publishing Batman stories without a sidekick, or doubled down on the team-up approach that saw the Caped Crusader dominate the Brave and the Bold series, but the creators understood Robin's important place within the larger Batman framework. In Batman issue 408, an official changing of the guard takes place as Dick relinquishes the Robin mantle and formally gives the title to Jason, setting the stage for a new era of Batman and Robin stories. As Jason cemented his place in the Bat universe, it became increasingly clear that the classic Bat-Robin dynamic flipped. Instead of Robin trying to bring joy out of Batman, Bruce had to worry about reining in his own partner's darker impulses. Dick Grayson is charm incarnate, a boy anyone could be proud to take home and introduce to their family, but Jason Todd was something entirely different. A smoker who was chock full of juvenile insults, Jason had no problem being guided by his carnal urges instead of allowing Bruce's lessons about self-control to take hold. Despite Robin's esteemed position in Batman comics, Jason Todd himself wasn't necessarily appreciated by fans. His bitter attitude could be seen as more realistic than the constantly chipper Dick Grayson, but something about Jason still wasn't connecting with audiences. Hell, even Jim Starlin, the writer behind Death in the Family, thought Jason was so annoying, he avoided using the character altogether in his first Batman issue. Violent and full of rage, Jason never found a home outside the cave like Dick did with the Titans, and he didn't necessarily bond with any other characters in the DCU, enabling his negative tendencies to fester mostly unchallenged. The character becomes so misguided that he even begs a criminal to resist so he can beat him harder, and it is heavily implied that Jason later pushes him to his death, causing the Caped Crusader to seriously consider whether or not Jason is fit to be Robin. Bruce can handle supervillains with flamethrowers and freeze rays, but it seems he's unequipped to deal with angsty teens who view life as a game. As a result of Jason's increasingly uncontrollable, moody behavior, Bruce strips him of the Robin mantle. Angry and unsatisfied with his mentor, Jason hits the streets and quickly learns that he was misled about his biological mother's identity, sending him on a worldwide search for the truth. Jason, like many hot-headed teens, may like to think he can take care of himself, but he quickly lands outside his comfort zone and comes face to face with the Clown Prince of Crime. Shipped with 2 different phone numbers in the back of the issue, fans were given 36 hours to call in and decide whether Robin should live or die. From September 15th at 8 a.m. until September 16th at 8 p.m., fans paid 50 cents to call in and cast their votes. Roughly 10,600 total votes were cast, but at the end of the day, there were 72 more calls pushing for Jason's death. The significance of the arc helped each issue sell out, and due to popular demand, a trade paperback was rushed to hit stores for Christmas, just 1 week after the story originally wrapped. According to a New York Times article published at the time, issue 427 was only 75 cents when it first came out, but it quickly shot up to $4 due to the book's event status. Editor Denny O'Neil even did numerous radio and print interviews to drive more attention to the book, but he soon stopped when he realized he didn't want to be known as the man who killed Robin. For such a foundational story, it has a somewhat ironic origin. As the AIDS epidemic was heating up, O'Neil wanted to publish a story where a certain character contracts the disease. Instead of letting a writer determine who the character would be, O'Neil put out a suggestion box and had DC employees vote on the decision. Already not a fan of Robin, Starlin stuffed the box full of cards with Jason's name on them. But since everyone recognized his handwriting, his multiple votes were discarded. While the suggestion box itself was eventually cast aside after Jimmy Olsen was selected as the AIDS recipient, the idea later inspired O'Neil to set up the call-in line that directly led to Jason's demise. Unfortunately, even after Jason's death, many fans' thoughts immediately turned to Dick Grayson. While people today love to debate which version of a character is the real one, the New York Times started an article 2 weeks after Jason's death by telling fans not to worry because the original Robin wasn't the one who died. Even the comic book store employee the article quotes says people were relieved because Dick Grayson they liked, but Jason Todd wasn't so popular. After death in the family, Jason's costume was put on display in the Batcave. While Batman is no stranger to collecting tokens, this one is different. Most items in the cave are meant to evoke some sense of nostalgia, for Bruce to remember all of the good he's accomplished over the years, but not Jason's costume. Safely sealed behind glass, the suit serves as a constant reminder for Bruce about his biggest failure, and even its central position in the cave symbolizes just how much it weighs on Bruce's mind. Instead of allowing himself to move past the incident, he feels obligated to confront it every day, resulting in him becoming more withdrawn and harsh in the following years. The loss of his parents starts Bruce down the road towards becoming Batman, but losing Jason solidifies his cold approach. The first hint at Jason's return was a misdirection from writer Jeff Loeb in Batman Hush. The core story follows Tommy Elliott, a childhood friend of Bruce's, trying to get under his skin and disrupt his life. Loeb, who believed that Bruce's internal motivation had to move past his parents' death since he'd already been the Caped Crusader for years at this point, figured that incorporating Jason's death was likely the most recent and painful experience to reference to rile up the stoic warrior. Over the years, Bruce had seen his parents' graves demarcated and had his family name slandered, but he'd never confronted his former partner. At the end of a long night that sees Batman confront some of his toughest villains, Hush seemingly corners Tim Drake. After some slow-building tension, the villain methodically removes his mask and reveals the long unseen face of Jason Todd, with another mask on. Instead of diving into action like his normal self, Batman hesitates, overwhelmed by emotion and partially in shock. While the incident ends up being a ruse pulled off by Clayface's shape-shifting abilities, the pain and shock it caused Batman was incredibly real. Hush may have misled fans into thinking Jason Todd was back, but the buzz around Clayface's deception kickstarted internal conversation about a true resurrection. After successful stints on Green Lantern and Green Arrow, writer Judd Winnick landed Batman and wanted to do something big on the book. With fans already salivating about the potential return of Jason Todd, it seemed like a no-brainer to move forward with that story. In Under the Hood, Judd Winnick introduces a new vigilante who takes it upon himself to violently disrupt Gotham's crime networks. Calling himself the Red Hood, a name that has strong association with the Joker, this new figure sees Batman's way of doing things as naive and tries to truly root out Gotham's criminals once and for all. Packed with intense moments like a showdown with the Joker, where Batman is scolded for letting his fiercest rival live despite what he's done, Under the Hood tried positioning Jason as a dark counterpart to Batman, someone willing to do the dirty work necessary to keep Gotham safe in the modern era. The problem with having a character return from the dead after nearly 20 years is coming up with an acceptable explanation for how and why he's back now. In an interview with Newsarama, Winnick revealed that much of the internal discussion hinged around the concept of when and if a character should ever return. But the writer himself was more interested in what the return would mean for Batman than physically how they could explain his resurrection. It's later revealed that Jason is resurrected as a result of Superboy Prime literally punching reality, and after digging himself out of the ground, he encounters Talia al Ghul, who ultimately helps him recover and sends him off seeking vengeance with a bag of money. As if that's not silly enough, DC retroactively tweaked Batman Hush to indicate that Jason was actually assisting the villain take down Batman after all. He simply chose to step aside at the last second for Clayface to take his place to preserve the illusion. In Winnick's opinion, Jason represents a living nightmare for Bruce, an embodiment of his greatest failure. So to see this living ghost is a deeply traumatizing event that changes him forever. And yes, for anyone out there wondering, Winnick did cast a vote to keep Jason alive back in 1988, so this lifelong fanboy finally got to see his wish come true. Part of what makes Jason such a difficult character to follow now is how often he crosses between being a hero and villain. His murderous tendencies are always intact, but at different points he has commandeered both the Nightwing and Batman mantles to perform his own vicious style of superheroics. During Grant Morrison's Batman and Robin run, Jason once again dips into Madman territory and patrols Gotham City in a brutal, social media-driven manner that forces Batman to take him down. But in the Red Hood and the Outlaw books that started just a few years later, Jason is more level-headed and depicted as an empathetic guy willing to help others without going full edgelord. He may have no problem killing people or making money from his services, but it's clear that Jason somewhat wants to be accepted by his mentor and seen as a good person. It's been almost 15 years since Jason clawed his way out of the ground and back into our hearts, and now his place in the DCU is more cemented than ever. Batman Arkham Knight framed Jason as a full-fledged villain, someone who has no problem rampaging through Gotham to make a point. But he's at his best when used as a symbol to explore the personal costs of being a hero.
How long did you wait before replacing me, huh? A month? A week? I trusted you!
Sure, Jason is back and inconsistently dealing with his own emotional baggage, but Batman still considers his inability to rescue Jason his biggest failure. The opinions of just a handful of fans altered the course of comic book history, putting a young boy in the dirt and forcing a man who had already lost his parents to bury a son, giving Batman another tragic reason to obsess over his war on crime. Luckily, it seems like the fans feel differently now. Perhaps out of a desire to see a grand what-if story take place, or maybe a lot of people just think actor Kieran Walters is a cutie.
Anybody want a brew?
Yeah, I do. No, he doesn't. No one wants a brew.
But a DC Universe-sponsored poll related to the Titans TV show indicated that nearly 2 times as many people want Jason to survive a potential encounter with the Joker than perish. For anyone keeping tally, the first poll only received 10,000 votes, while this new one has a combined total above 50,000. So clearly more people are interested in Jason's fate now, since the character has grown so much over the years. Regardless of whether the on-screen version lives or dies, one thing is clear. Don't let Jason Todd near your women or your cars, because the man will definitely go in for the swoop.